Hi, this is a continuation from the first video. So in the first video, we printed out all the devices that are currently connected to the computer. And then in this video, what we'll do is we'll write the code and test it out to pull the controller and see if we're pressing a button. So if we want to automatically select a controller by type, all we have to do is we get the current controller and get its type and see if it's equal to controller dot type dot, and in this case the Logitech rumble pad is a stick, so we select stick, and then we run the code and it should only print out one controller. Yep, it only prints out one controller. And so now let's get into the real meat and bones. So let's create a new variable controller, and instead of printing it out this time, let's actually set it equal to it. So controller equals controllers select I, and then let's create an event queue which will process all the events that are happening in the controller. So let's do controller.get event queue, and let's initialize it, and then let's create an event which represents a singular event from the event queue. And now let's create a Boolean variable to control the loop. So let's just say stopped equals false. And now let's create the loop. And this is going to have the stopped condition. And now every time this loop iterates, we should poll the controller. And we do controller.poll. And we want to put each singular event into this variable. So what we have to do is event queue that get next event, and this method will put each the next event from the queue into the event. Now let's set up a new component, and from the event, let's get the component. And right now, let's check if the component is null. And if it is null, we don't want to continue because if the user isn't pressing anything, the component will become null and it will throw a null pointer exception. So let's figure out what component it is. So let's do component identifier and then component dot get identifier. And in this example, let's just do a simple button press. So let's do if identifier equals component dot identifier dot button dot the first button, and then let's just create a simple message like button 1, well, button 0 was pressed. So button 0 is actually button 1 that's labeled on your controller. So this is actually button 1, this one I'm pressing right now. Okay, so now let's run the program. And now let's press button 1. And as you can see, the message that we wanted it to display is indeed displaying on the screen. So now instead of just printing out a simple message, let's actually print out some actual data. So to do that, let's create a new variable. Float data equals component.get poll data. And now let's also create an identifier for the access. Identifier equals component.identifier.access.rotational z. And right here, let's make it print out the data. And here also, just instead of a simple button was pressed, let's also make that print out data. So the rotational z-axis is this axis, and if you go up and down, that is the rotational z-axis. Side to side is the z-axis, and here is the xy axis. So this is x, this is y, and this is the hat switch button, and these are the buttons, and there's some trigger buttons here. So um, let's actually run the program. Okay, so now that the program is running, let's move the axis all the way up. And as you can see, it becomes -1. And if you let go, you can see that it's a very small number. And that's because you need to create a dead zone on this to make sure that if it's a very small number, it rounds itself down to 0. So if you bring the axis all the way down, it will become 1. And if you press the button, it will become 1. And if you don't press the button, it's going to become 0. So that's it for this video. If you have any more questions or want to go in depth a bit more, just comment down below, and I'll be sure to do that. Thanks.